Here are 5 tips to ace your next interview. Full disclosure, I'm mainly going to be focusing on wildlife rehabilitation and or other conservation related jobs, but these tips go for any sort of interview, not necessarily just wildlife stuff. I managed a volunteer and internship program for many years at a wildlife rehabilitation hospital, so I have some insight on what I look for in candidates, and also I'm a pretty good interviewer myself. The first thing is to have just general basic good interview etiquette. Make sure that you show up to your interview on time. Showing up earlier is better than showing up later. You want to be well groomed, so make sure you take a shower and put on deodorant. It seems like really basic stuff, but you'd be surprised on how many college students forget to do this. You also want to wear a nice outfit too. And for wildlife related stuff, you don't have to go the full 9 yards. Like, you're not interviewing to work at a bank. You're not interviewing to like intern at an office, right? So people in the wildlife field tend to be a lot more lax about their attire, but you still should make an effort. That being said, in wildlife rehabilitation, I wouldn't usually hold it against people if they were not dressed up great, especially if they told me, hey, I just came from class and we were doing field stuff. And for me personally, I'd prefer to have candidates that have done field stuff are fine with getting gross, because you're going to get really gross in rehab. So I wouldn't hold that against them, but I also don't think that that's the best strategy. If you're sitting here and going, I don't really know what kind of outfit to wear at all, I think business casual should be the kind of outfits that you should seek out. For me, this is a personal thing, but I also really appreciate people who are like wearing wildlife related things. I also think that this could be a good idea, in part because the person that is interviewing you also cares about wildlife, right? And if you're wearing Eastern screech owl earrings, it can be a good talking point. If they compliment you on those earrings, you can be like, yeah, no, I love owls. I really love owls. Eastern screech owls are my favorite owl. Obviously, you don't want to be like, oh my God, I'm going to talk to you about owls for 30 minutes. But I think that that can be a good segue to break the ice, especially if you're nervous, because instead of them being like, so why do you want to be here? You've already talked about something that's neutral and something that you like and something that's about you. And I think that that can lower your anxiety and have you do a better interview. Wildlife rehabilitation specifically is full of really passionate people, and so they like to see other people who are really passionate about wildlife. And I think accessorizing is a way that you can do that. The second thing that you need to do is you need to sell yourself. You want to be conversational while also being formal. I think especially in wildlife rehabilitation, I appreciate people who are really down to earth. And I also really appreciate when people are honest with me. So for instance, I think at the start of the interview while you're sitting down, you can be like, thanks for meeting with me. This is the first interview I've ever done, and honestly, I'm a little bit nervous, but I really appreciate this opportunity. And what I think that you're doing there is you're admitting something that's truthful and might be evident, but you're also owning it at the same time. I think that that level of earnestness is not something that everyone can pull off, but I think when people come in contact with it, they really respond to it. You're kind of taking something that's negative, right? Your anxiety, and you're making something positive about it. Yes, I'm anxious, but I am very thankful to be here right now, right? Similarly, they might be like, one of our hesitations about you is you don't have any hands-on animal experience. And instead of being like, yeah, I don't, what you can do instead, I may not have experience working hands-on with animals. That's correct. However, and then you list something that gives you credibility. And it can be anything from, I'm a conservation student and this is my passion. I'm a biology student and I'm part of these clubs that involve wildlife. I may not have any official formal experience working with animals, but I've pet sat for my friends and family before. And I think this is also where you can really show your dedication to something. So for example, I have had students intern with me that are not science students. People in the humanities that are interested in communication, history, stuff like that. And those people still got the internship because they had really good reasons as to why they wanted the internship. So a communication student could say, yeah, I don't have any experience hands-on with wildlife, nor am I a STEM major. But what I want to do with my life is I want to write about conservation. I want to work at National Geographic or Animal Planet or run a social media page for a conservation organization. And although in my career, I'm not going to be the person who's hands-on, I think it's really important for me to get this hands-on experience early in my career so I know what I'm writing about. I think this hands-on opportunity will give me a better understanding of conservation and why it matters. And there's an example of someone who took something that would have been a strike against them and turned it into something that's really kind of inspiring, right? At the end of the day, you're trying to give this organization a good reason to want you. This is where you show off the best parts of yourself. So if you're someone who's really academically gifted, you should kind of show that off a little bit. You don't want to brag and you don't want to seem like the expert in that situation. But if there's an opportunity to respond to something that they said in an intelligent way, I think you should. So for example, if this facility specializes in birds, You might ask them in the interview, what kind of birds do you specialize in? Waterfowl, songbirds, raptors? You're showing your curiosity in the organization, and you're also showing, hey, I know that there's different categories of birds. Again, don't come off like a know-it-all, but I think that that can be useful. Maybe you're not super academically gifted, but you've done a lot of volunteer work. Highlight the fact that you're a caring person. I don't have any experience with wildlife, but I volunteered at the animal shelter for 2 years while I was in high school. I don't have any animal experience at all, but I fundraised $5,000 for cancer research. Think about words that describe yourself and figure out how you can work that into your interview. And as part of that, number 3 is to ask good questions. I think that you should go into all interviews with at least 5 good questions in your back pocket. The reason why I say choose 5 is for 2 reasons. 1, chances are some of those questions are going to be answered in your interview. So by having a couple backups, you ensure that you will have a question to ask. 2nd, it'll seem like you've done your research. So a couple example questions. What is the average day like here? What values does your facility prioritize? What other opportunities are there for me as an intern outside of the internship, if any? You want these questions to show interest in the organization and also your role in the organization. Number 4, develop a relationship with the person interviewing you. I think it's always a good idea at the very end of the interview, if they ask you if you have any other questions, to ask them a question about themselves. Here's the secret, okay? People love talking about themselves. I think a simple one to go to is, what led you to this profession? In rehab, I think a good one is asking them what is their favorite animal to work with and why. I think another good one is to ask what's the weirdest or most unusual thing that they've dealt with while on the job. You can also ask about yourself too. If I don't get this internship, what can I do to make my application more competitive next year? In saying that, you've showed them that 1, you really care about this position to the point that you're willing to have a second go at it if you don't get it this time. I think if it's one of the first times that you've been interviewed and you feel comfortable asking this question with the interviewer, I think that you can ask them if they have any tips on how to improve your interviewing based on the interview you just had. Just like how people really like talking about themselves, people also really like helping people, especially in nonprofit work. And finally, be thankful. Thank them for their time and say that you enjoyed talking to them, even if you didn't. Again, you're showing off your professionalism and the fact that you care. I also think it's not a bad idea to email the person you interviewed later that evening so they'll get the email the next morning, just thanking them for the experience. I hope that advice will help you ace your next interview. But you may be more curious about the part that comes before the interview, about getting the interview to begin with, which means finding an internship and having a really, really solid application. And for some solid advice on that, watch this video next.